Hello, hello. Welcome back. I'm Tony Collis, your coach. And today I want to talk to you about something really important. This is a very special episode. This is actually a webinar that my colleague Megan and I recorded late last year. And it's been so popular that my team was like, this needs to go on the podcast because people hear about it, ask me for the recording, I send it to them. But actually, everything we talked about in that episode is still so relevant today. And it's about the job market. It's about how today, and everything we talked about in the fall is actually still very, very relevant right now. We've been keeping a very close eye on the job market, what is and isn't working with all the clients we have who are landing jobs or not landing jobs, as the case may be. We have amazing access to data because of the work we do. So what we did in the webinar was drill down into what we knew was and wasn't working. And that is everything we speak about in this recording you're about to hear is still true today. We've been keeping a close eye on it. So I wanted to share this with you. Because if you are job hunting or thinking about job hunting this year, take a listen before you start. Take a listen before you start fiddling with stuff, before you start canvassing. Don't waste your time. It is so easy to waste your time in the current job market. You need to use your time incredibly effectively. So take a listen to this and let me know what you think. As you probably all know, if you've registered for this, my business is all about women in tech. That is my mission in life. Megan and I have both been women in tech ourselves. I set up my company because I cared so deeply about elevating women in tech, having got to the C-suite within 7 years myself and realizing we need great leadership to get there. Along the way, after all these years of coaching, training coaches like Megan, I've realized that one of the things I have to do alongside supporting women in their job is supporting them in landing their next role. There's no great in making you a great leader and making sure you can navigate the room if you can't get in the room in the first place. So landing jobs, promotions, this is part of my business imperative. It is part of the mission of my company because without a job, how can you change the world? But let's talk about what's coming up today. We're going to talk about the current job market landscape. This is as of 2024, the tail end of 2024. What we say today is probably going to run into next year, although who knows with what's going on in the US, how that's going to play out. And then, even if you're elsewhere in the world, what's happening in the US elections is going to have a ripple effect across the world. It is already happening. So we're going to talk about that and the impact on that on what you might want to be doing with the rest of this year or into 2025. So if you're watching the replay, you might be watching it towards the end of the year. What we're talking about today, in my experience, is probably going to be valid for a couple more months, right? And then we're going to talk about networking, why it matters now more than ever, and how to get started, even if you hate networking like I do. Then what I would view is the most important part of the session is diagnosing your blockers. We don't do this at the beginning because you need to understand the journey, but you have to understand what is holding up your job hunt, if that is where you're at right now. So we're going to have a whole section on diagnosing your blockers, why you haven't landed a job yet, and then how you're going to take action. That's where we're going to wrap up today. So without further ado, let's crack on. I am very, very aware that for every single one of us, this is a different world. Right? We have seen in the last 2 years a market I've never experienced before. We've had boom and bust cycles before. We've had many of them. But this one is different. Partly, I would say this one is different because we are in a situation where we are now using technology to navigate the job market, both us as individuals, but also the company. So every single one of you at this point has probably experienced AI in the form of job hunting, whether that's using ChatGPT to help you write a better resume, or you've gone through an applicant tracking system, which has rejected your resume. Some of our clients have had to do video interviews where they just get sent a list of questions to answer on video asynchronously with the claim that it's monitored by AI. But this didn't happen in 2008, right? This is a whole different way of us navigating a downturn. And most of us are having to figure out how to do this for the first time. And it's tricky. It's hard. What Megan and I have seen time and time again, though, is that persistence, and resilience are the things that are going to get you through. We see those clients of ours who are doing the work, every single one of them lands a job. If they are struggling to land a job, there's something else going on typically, most often the mindset, or they're not doing the right work which is why we talk about diagnosing your blockers later on. There's no point in tweaking your resume if it's your job interview techniques that there's blocker. There's no point in polishing your job interview technique if you don't know how to do your first 90 days presentation, and that's actually the blocker. So really, it's about having the persistence and the right mindset to move forward, and that's part of what we're going to talk about today. So let's talk about what is actually going on. Megan, feel free to chime in on any of this, by the way. One of the things we are definitely seeing is huge amounts of competition. And I think many of us are very daunted by this. We're thinking, I can't apply for this. I'm sure all of you have seen the job advert on LinkedIn that goes up and within 24 hours has 500 candidates. And you're thinking, there's no point in applying. Here's the thing that people aren't talking about, though. We are still in a situation where 85% or more of jobs are not advertised. Those ones are not getting those high levels of applicants. The problem is they're not advertised. That's always been true, by the way, but we're seeing this disparity more than ever. We are also seeing that leadership skills are more important than ever. I'm hearing numbers of like CEOs that I work with saying, I want a leader, player, coach. I don't want a manager. Managers are no longer useful. We want leader, player, coaches. And coaching in particular is something that's really misunderstood. I started training coaches as a coach myself because I saw my leaders needing to know what coaching really meant. It is not mentoring. It is not having career conversations. That is not coaching. It is coaching your team to do the right work in the right way by asking them powerful questions. And most managers don't know how to do that. So if you're going for a leadership role, which is obviously something that we really are passionate about in this company, not the only reason you can be here, by the way, but whether you're going for an IC leadership role, like a thought leader or a people leader, you need to be able to show that you are leadership material. You need to be adaptable. You need to be innovative. You need to be cross-functional focused. You need to talk business, and you need to be a player coach as well. And then there's the tricksy numbers. So far this year, there has been 503, on average, 503 layoffs per day, people in the US. And I want to tell you that although that's a little bit scary and horrible, last year, the average was over double that, an average of 1,175 layoffs per day. So we are better off than last year, okay? And I just want you to realize that the situation is not as bad as it sometimes feels. Equally, in a lot of us are finding that we are moving to the kind of, we're moving to, we have to go back to the office. I want you to know that although that is true, there are plenty of companies still offering remote work, if that's the thing that's important to you, as well as hybrid. And a large part of this is knowing where to look and how to look. It's really, really important to feel some optimism with these numbers. Things are improving. And I think after the US election, we're going to see some stability. Whichever way the election goes, I think companies are just desperate for some stability. That stability will happen, if you see what I mean. We'll go from this period of we don't know what's going to happen to, well, we now have this. This is the market for the next couple of years. So irrespective of how the election goes, I know a lot of us are like, how is it going to go? It's scary. I think we're going to see a period of stability in the job market simply because there hasn't been any. Megan, would you agree with that one? I know we haven't talked about this before, but would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And we've seen this before in election cycles, right? So obviously there's been, I live in the US, Tony does not. So just a little bit of context there. Mm-hmm. But every election cycle, there is uncertainty, right? The stock market gets a little bit more concerned. Wallets within companies as a reaction, they tend to be a little bit more conservative until we understand where things are going to lay. And then they open up, right? Mm-hmm. So this is every 4-year side effect of the election cycles within the US. And it does not mean that there, aren't opportunities currently. There are a plethora of opportunities. As Tony said, part of it is knowing where to look. And then understanding like, and every year, not only do we have the election cycle, it's end of year earnings, right? So organizations are looking at where they're falling financially within their goals. And so just being aware of what that cyclical nature is, I think is helpful to anticipate like, yes, I am making progress. Continuing to move forward is crucial. And there is some seasonality to the job market. So even if you're not seeing things super present on LinkedIn or wherever they might be, wherever you might be looking, the opportunities still exist despite some of this uncertainty within the economy right now.
100%. And I think that is the thing. It is cyclical and things do come down. Both Megan and I saw over the summer a kind of unusual uptick in opportunities in July, which normally you do not get, especially in the US market. And I put this down to like a desperation from companies for some stability. So they just started behaving like they would a stable time of year, which normally is not the summer. Normally everybody knows everybody's traveling over the summer. There's holidays, there's vacations, kids at home. We don't hire as much in the summer. But there's this desperation for stability right now. So it is coming. Let me move on to some truths and some myths. These are comments that Megan and I get pretty much on a weekly basis. Some hold some element of truth, some don't. And let's have a conversation about this for a few minutes. Okay, so what we're hearing. It's harder than ever before to land a new job. Yes and no. Yes, it is a really tough market. We've had downturns before, especially in the tech sector. Boom and bust is one of our cycles, right? I think what's different, I would say it's different than ever before. We now have to work in a different place. We have to know how to navigate applicant tracking systems. What we are seeing, because there is so much competition, which is not new, we've seen this in every economic downturn, is because there is more competition, you have to interview better than everybody else. 3 years ago, it kind of felt like if you threw in your resume, you were guaranteed a job and a pretty good salary. Right? That is not true today. What we found 3 years ago, certainly what I was doing 3 years ago, was elevating my clients to land better jobs, and particularly leadership jobs, is a different way of interviewing. What we're now finding is everybody has to compete. You have to get yourself in that top 5%. It no longer waits until you're a senior leader. I used to say, like, you can get away without knowing how to do this until you're quite late on in your career. And then people will come to us because they've hit that glass ceiling for lots of reasons as women. And one of the things we need to look at is how to interview as a leader. What we're now finding is you have to do that much earlier in your career. So yes, it is harder in that sense, but it's actually the same tools that we're using. Referrals. Megan, do you want to take this one? I know you have some views about referrals.
Yeah. So oftentimes we'll hear, well, referrals don't work. I think one of the key things to understand is organizations are changing and they're evaluating whether their referral network works in the first place, right? So I think there's a very big difference between somebody put in an automated referral that may not know me into the system and therefore, and I haven't moved anywhere. Therefore, referrals don't work. I think that is where this comment is primarily coming from. And that really falls down to not having a true advocate within the organization. When you have a true advocate, that is somebody who understands you, who says, yes, Tony is the person that you want for this job, that goes significantly further and does help you land at least a recruiter screen and begin the interview process. So really, it's more around how are companies evaluating the efficacy of that referral and bonus program for their bottom line. And when it comes down to it, we really want people that we would actually vouch for their work for. And so that's the nuance that we're seeing right now is companies are reevaluating that like bonus structure for the internal referrals and relying more on the advocates of people who are like bringing these star players into the organization.
100%. Which brings me to, this is the new normal. Yes and no applies to this one too, in that I do think what we've seen is a change, is a shift. We are going to be using more technology, for example, in the hiring market. I don't see that going away. I do think we're going to have a bit of a reevaluation in a few years' time about the efficacy and the ethical nature of things like applicant tracking systems, because I think what it's doing is kicking out amazing candidates And I do think that's unethical, because at the end of the day, your ability to navigate AI in terms of like playing the game to get your resume through has zero bearing on your ability to do a job. But at the moment, companies can get away with it because they've got enough candidates, right? So I do think there's some of this that is here to stay. I also know, just based on history, that we are going to get to a point again when it's going to be the candidates' court again, where we are going to have more opportunities than the companies, and therefore the ball will be back in our court. So yes and no, some of this is here to stay, but I don't think it's here to stay forever. And I also think that things will change. The thing that I do not know, and nobody can tell you this, is how long is it going to last. This has already lasted a very long time. We've been in this state for 2 years. I would say that's one of the longest in the last 20 years of having an economic downturn that's hitting job market stuff. I think we're in a very strange period economically as a species. we just are. We've never really recovered from the 2008 financial crisis into economically. A lot of countries have never really come out of austerity. We are dealing with elderly populations. It's the whole economics thing going on here, which is impacting companies. And so in that sense, I don't think we really know what's going to happen. My advice to everybody is treat today like the last day you have, just get on with it. Like if you keep waiting, we don't know how long it's going to go on for. Which brings me to number 4 here. Many leaders are having to move back to ICs. So here's the truth and the myth on this one. The truth is some leaders are going back to being ICs. The reality is it's either choice or because they haven't figured out how to do that player, leader, coach discussion at interview. That's what we're seeing. We are seeing clients getting promotions. We had somebody last year who skipped 2 levels during the worst hiring market. 2023 was the worst year. And she skipped 2 levels, got a pay rise, and moved industry. She moved from, I think, marketing into AI. I mean, she was in a product role, so she was a product leader, took on more leadership responsibility. And I mean, she's an outstanding individual in that sense of like, she did something unusual, but she's just a case in point. And we are seeing if you're determined and you're prepared to put in the work of figuring out how to interview as a leader, you don't have to go back to being an IC. People are just being more discerning. Which brings us to point number 5, middle management being removed. Megan, I've got some interesting views on this, just based on a couple of layoffs in the last month, actually. What do you think?
Yeah. So, I think this is somewhat tied to the misperception around leaders being moved back to being ICs. So, is there an organization? Some very prominent organizations have been talking about flattening their orgs, right? Mm-hmm. So, really kind of moving people who were leaders into IC positions. There is some organizational change going. To Tony's point, part of that is how do you actually have those discussions when the organization changes, and how do you position yourself to maintain the leadership, assuming that that's what you want in terms of like the people leadership. From a middle management position being removed on the job market, what I can say, Tony had said earlier, 85% of the jobs are not advertised. These are in particular your middle management. So your director, your senior director, even VP style positions are very heavy on the hidden job market. So they're not being advertised, but they do exist. And then to that earlier point, there is some shift in terms of organizational change. Now, to the concept of is this the new normal? My philosophy is an organizational structure is always a temporary solution to a permanent problem. That is an ebb and flow for each organization based on its own level of maturation, right? So when I think about what is the role for middle management within a company, it really goes hand in hand with what is the level of sophistication? Where are they at from a maturity perspective with their product? And what is it that middle management in particular is giving? So while some organizations you may see flattening, other organizations are developing hierarchy. And to me, that's really more of a reflection of how are they thinking about the product, the delivery, and the scaling of their organization moving forward. That's my personal take, Tony.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think this is where it fits in with basically everything else here. You can't land roles above your current responsibility level. It's fitting in with the same thing. Like, it's, can you demonstrate that you are actually capable of the next level? You have to do this in a different way. There is a thinning of management potentially, but having said that, there's at least 3 companies that I know have done layoffs in the last month. Some of them are Fortune 50 companies, so huge companies. I'm not going to name names, but because I know people, I'm coaching people on the inside of those companies, I know they've not got rid of any middle management to the point it's upsetting the ICs. All the layoffs have been ICs. So it's really about understanding how to navigate, particularly the current application market, knowing how to position yourself. So industry side tips are impossible. I was shared earlier about that client of ours who landed a role in AI. I mean, that's a growth industry, but one, it's about knowing where to go, how to position yourself, how to answer the questions, and how to make yourself invaluable. For her, it was her leadership that made her invaluable. There aren't that many people who know AI. So somebody who's got great leadership, shows that they can learn, that is way more useful than almost anything else. We've kind of already answered the next one. There are no leadership positions at all. We know firsthand, like, we're in the business of landing women leadership jobs, and we're doing that every single week. But what I would say is the one thing on here that really is 100% true is that AI has changed everything, almost. It is still people. It's still about people, but even people who are getting referrals, a lot of them are still going through an AI filter of some description, right? So AI is changing an awful lot. There are now AI background checks. LinkedIn is saying quick apply, and some of that is powered by AI. LinkedIn is now recommending, hey, this is how you should write your job description, or this is how you can match yourself to this. It's making suggestions. Not, by the way, very helpful. We actually recommend not listening to LinkedIn suggestions because it's not good enough yet. But everything is shifting because of this. We also know that you can really speed up your application process and your interview preparation by using something like ChatGPT, provided you know how to drive it. As always, you have to become your own prompt engineer. And then finally, recorded videos are definitely a thing, sadly. They're not that common yet. And I say yet because as much as I think they're horrendous, sadly, I think they might be here to stay. Megan, what's your take on that?
Yeah. And what's interesting is when I'm actually working with clients, one of the things I do is I ask them to record a voice snippet or a video. Not because it's necessarily going to be used in the interview, but because it is a really good reflection for for yourself, right? Especially in the absence of being able to practice with somebody else. And there is a certain human element. And when I think about how are we going to interact in a virtual platform, while Tony and I are in a conversation with everybody here listening, it's really just me talking to a computer, right? And so there is an element of how natural do you feel in uncomfortable situations? And what does that tell me as an employer about your ability to kind of persevere through what may be very awkward client interactions or difficult situations? So now, is a video interview an exact replica, right? To me, part of the benefit of an interview process is to exchange information. And when it's a video, it is one way. You're being asked a question to respond to. And so to me, it's more understanding what is it that they're trying to get at from a video interview? Why is this important to them? And then tailoring the technique. But to your point, I've only heard it in about 5% of the cases at this point, and most commonly with smaller global companies.
Yeah. And, I think one of the reasons they might be here to stay is because in a world where many of us are remote or have a team in a remote location, even if we go into an office, and also in a world where as leaders, we are expected to represent a company. And whether you like it or not, ladies, this is another conversation potentially to have on another webinar. Part of being a leader is being a voice of an organization. Is when you're at a conference, you're not just there for you, you're there for your organization. Part of a video interview is assessing, is this person the kind of leader that we are happy to have representing us? I know basically from my middle management responsibilities upwards, part of what I was being assessed on was, do we trust her to stand up and talk for us? Whether you know that's what's going on or not, that is part of your job. So recorded videos, I think they're here to stay in some form or other. Again, we've got to have a conversation what they look like. But let's talk about you all now. It is an increasingly competitive market out there. As I said, that could all change, but we aren't sure. And as we've also discussed, AI filters are the new normal for now. And Meg and I are very passionate that this is not an improvement. We truly believe it is, at least at the moment, filtering out really great talent, because it is not measuring your ability to do the job. It's measuring your ability to guess what AI has been programmed to do. Bear in mind that AI is still programmed. Like the filters will be told, these are the keywords. A human has got to decide that, and it's quite often and not the hiring manager that decides that. And even if it is the hiring manager, my experience, hiring managers often don't know what they're looking for until they start interviewing and, oh, that's not the candidate I wanted. So having talked to a lot of HR folks on this, that's one of their biggest frustrations is they get halfway through a hiring process and the hiring manager will be like, none of these candidates were what I wanted. And it's because the hiring manager doesn't know what they want when they start, right? But leadership qualities are incredibly important right now, but you've got to be a leader, player, coach, not a manager. Leadership and management are different, and you've got to be able to demonstrate that in your application packet and in interview. And nobody wakes up knowing how to demonstrate that. This is not something you just figure out by osmosis. You've got to learn it. And something that is really freaking everybody out is this hundreds of applications within a couple of hours of jobs opening. Megan, I know you've got a view on what's going on LinkedIn there. So give us your insight.
I do. So LinkedIn came out with Easy Apply. So one of the biggest challenges, as anybody who's applied to a job understands, is actually creating the resume packet and your application packet with a cover letter, et cetera. In some respects, I believe that this feature was created to reduce that friction, and which would be super helpful. The problem with that is people are just clicking apply to jobs that are irrelevant for them. And the amount of information on a LinkedIn profile is never effectively tailored to do the lift for the hiring manager who needs to who essentially you need to be speaking, this is my experience and this is why it matters for that job. And so people are automatically just clicking those buttons regardless of their true intent, desire for the position, right? I will tell you at an early point in my career, I definitely had the 11 o'clock have a tub of ice cream. I want out of this job. I'm going to go click easy apply, right? That is ultimately clogging up the system. And therefore, I don't think if you see hundreds or thousands of people have applied to this position, that it means that you don't have a shot. What it means is a lot of people chose to click easy apply and we don't know their intentions or their qualifications. So that I firmly am against utilizing that because again, it doesn't do the lift for you. But I think it's also just a really bad indicator of the popularity and likelihood that someone would get into an interview process in there. And also, referrals aren't dead, right? So even if there are thousands of people, we just had somebody who went through an interview at one of the large big 5 tech companies where there were 10,000 applicants for the position, but through a referral, they were able to get in and get that interview, right? So that number doesn't matter as much as your desire for that position and intentionality about pursuing it.
100%. And that particular individual, I think we're talking about the same person. One of the things to bear in mind there is that is one of the top 10 companies in the world. One of these ones that is incredibly competitive. People are like, you can't get in there. You know, you need to have an Ivy League education. I'm pretty sure this particular lady doesn't. And in addition, a lot of people will say, yeah, you have to tick 100 boxes. And she got in. And I think it was one of the first interviews she's had, right, Megan?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I just want you to hear, this actually brings me to this slide. How to stand out. Let's use a case in point about how she's done this. And she's used networking as her main way to do it. But to do that, you need to understand why people want to have a conversation with you, whether it's through networking or whether you are actually at the interview or whether they were seeing your resume. You have to demonstrate how you are unique in terms of strengths, accomplishments, your leadership style, what sets you apart. So, for example, If you're focused on specific results, right, we are hugely recommending you get very specific with results, by the way, quantitative as much as possible, such as leading a project to successful completion, implementing a new solution for a project. You've built your team out. How specifically did you do that? What was the specific outcome? What was unique about your approach, your leadership style, your contributions? And make sure you clarify that and are able to talk about it. Talk about it on LinkedIn. Talk about it in your resume. Talk about it in your cover letter. Talk about it in your interview technique. Once you start getting that unique value proposition, you then want to make sure that that information is everywhere, but particularly online. Control your online presence, ladies. This is so important. Do not go with the default on LinkedIn. You need your online presence to be relevant and recent. Get rid of the stuff from 20 years ago. Your college degree kind of doesn't matter. I do have mine there. But honestly, it's not that important. I want you removing stuff that is your first couple of jobs, unless it's only a few years ago. And certainly if it's a job where it was nothing to do with what you currently do. You should only have jobs in your LinkedIn profile and other public-facing situations where it is relevant to the role you are going for. Otherwise, it's noise that will actually bring you down in the search rankings, right? The key thing that Megan and I are always going on about with clients is if you aren't getting people reaching out to you on LinkedIn, your online profile isn't working. If you're getting reach out, but it's of the wrong kinds, for the wrong job, the wrong level, the wrong salary, then there's something wrong and we need to tweak that, right? You have to do this in a data-driven approach. We're big believers of this. Make a tweak, watch it for 2 weeks, see what happens, and keep tweaking and changing. I mean, we've got a pretty good recipe that gets you like 99% of the way there, but you've got to then tweak and change and see what's coming up. You've got to get the right keywords for the industry, for the role that are for you, which brings me to the next point. Stop the whole spray and pray approach with applications. Most of the time, that is the quick apply on LinkedIn. And seriously, you will get 0 responses. But even just the same generic resume sent out to 20 companies, you're going to get very close to 0. Very, very close, right? It is better to send one really tailored application that highlights the relevance to that industry, your experience relevant to that company, your passion for that company, focusing on how your unique experience aligns with what they're after in terms of strengths, values, career, what they're trying to achieve. Do that. You will go way further and faster than the spray and pray approach. So just stop. That is something that is done. That worked 3 years ago. It does not work today. Right? And then the most important thing in my mind is how you network. And we are going to do a whole section on networking in just a couple of slides' time, because this is the thing that really works. It was important for leaders 3 years ago. It is now important for everybody. If you have relationships that people are believing in you, where they say, Megan, she's the lady you want, that's the woman who is going to change this company, doors will open. But what we are finding is that people don't know how to network. And I say this as somebody who is like, when I do personality tests, I go so far at the introverted end, I'm like off the scale. People are like, how do you spend all day on Zoom? Believe me, I spend all day on Zoom and then I need to sleep for 3 hours and not talk to other humans. Like, I can't talk to humans in my evenings after a week of work. Like, I just can't because I'm so introverted. I hated networking. But now I have a recipe for networking, which is about offering value, about being the person that is going to help that person move forward and not being in a room of 100 people. And this opens doors. This is how I landed my first C-level position, was networking. And it isn't, I need a job. That does not work. We have to stop doing that, right? It is making those meaningful connections. It is having conversations which change that person's life. You might not think you are, but you are. And then finally, the most important thing, you need to demonstrate that you are ready for that role before you get the job. This has always been true for promotions. It now applies to applications. You need to be sharing on LinkedIn why you're appropriate for that next level. You need to be, if you can, if you're open to it, write articles, comment on relevant topics, speak at events, showcase your leadership for that next level you're going for before you apply for it. And certainly your resume needs to highlight how you're ready for that role, even if you don't have the job title. You do not need the job title to get that next level, But you do need to be able to say, I've been operating at that level in these ways without the job title. And you can probably do that far easier than you think you can. I want you to know you almost certainly have the skills to the next level, because most of us do. This is about showing your audience, showing the people that are reading your resume of your capabilities, and making sure that they respect you for that so you can land the job you deserve. Okay, I want you to follow this recipe. We're going to go through networking in just a minute, but this is the recipe that we know works. So if nothing else, screenshot this slide. This recipe we have used, I've probably used this over a couple of 100 times at this point. I've been using this for more than like the last 18 months, 2 years. In the last 2 years, this has become essential. But this is a recipe that works every single time. The reason it doesn't work is when somebody misses a step or skips or has a mindset wobble or spends time on the wrong thing. So here are the 8 steps to land a job in this market, and pretty much in our experience, any market. 1, clarify your leadership brand. Now, what do I mean by that? What are your core values as a human being? What is your leadership style? Are you an authentic leader in the sense of like you show up as your authentic self? Are you somebody who's very thoughtful? Are you the kind of person who is leading through change all the time? What is it that you bring as a unique leader to the table in your organization? Transformational, team builder, visionary, strategist. Know what your leadership brand is, your specialism. Maybe you're a growth leader. You always take a company through hypergrowth. Maybe you always take somebody through IPO. Figure out what it is. Then optimize your online presence. You need your brand before you can optimize. If you don't know what you are, you don't know what you stand for, you cannot write a great online presence. And then you need to make sure that your resume, any portfolios that you need, if you're in such an industry that needs portfolio, everything is aligned. It's all aligned. So optimize only once you know your brand. Use the keywords and the phrases from the industry and the kind of company that you want to make sure that that is all aligned. The optimization is a critical, unskippable step and takes time. Right? Then you need to roll that out everywhere. Everybody needs to know that this is who this lady is. This is what I do. This is my specialism. These are my key impacts. This is my brand. This is why I am unmissable and why you need to talk to me. Everybody needs to know this, which means your resume, your online profile, engaging with people, even the way you turn up to your kids' soccer practice, believe it or not. I've had clients in the tech industry where we think we're in our little bubble, and when we go out into the real world, we don't meet anybody in tech. I've had clients land jobs at soccer practice because they show up as that leader, even in that situation. This is about understanding what authenticity as a leader means. It comes from within. It's not a facade you put on when you turn up to work. It is who you are. When you can do that and show up everywhere that way, all sorts of doors open for you. Then once you have all that, you finally start reaching out to companies. You start researching and looking for the right roles, looking for the right companies that align with your values, your leadership style. And then you start applying. Now, we put applying in here for good reason. Although we're huge believers in networking, as I mentioned, a lot of companies still put you through an applicant tracking system, right? So what we tend to do is get you to apply for a few jobs and see if you're getting through the applicant tracking system without referral. If you are, then when you get a referral, you're also going to get through the applicant tracking system, right? Otherwise, we don't know why the referral didn't work. So once you start researching, I want you then practicing getting your resume out there through tailoring to get through the applicant tracking system. And make sure that it is able to do that. We tend to go by some metrics, which Megan is going to go over in a bit. Only then do you then really start leveraging your network. We tend to get you networking all the way through, but you then start asking your network for support. You ask them to provide additional connections. You don't ask for a job. You ask for connections, and eventually that is going to turn to somebody who can give you a referral. Then we get to the interview process. Yes, I know, all the way down here. There's no point in mastering the interview process if you haven't got an online presence, if you aren't getting through applicant tracking systems, and you aren't leveraging your network, and you don't know what you stand for. So at that point, we then go into how to interview as a leader, how to interview for senior leadership in particular. How do you talk about your decision-making style, your ability to handle challenges, all those behavioral questions. Your tech stuff is probably not the thing holding you back. It's answering the questions such as, what did you do last time you messed up? What they want to see there is that you are able to recover from a setback. So if you just kind of go, I don't mess up, or, well, I did this and actually everything went fine, because you aren't demonstrating your ability to navigate challenge and own disappointment. So knowing how to interview really well as a leader is a skill that is a lifelong skill that you need to learn ASAP. Then you need to know how to follow up, how to deal with gaps. Everybody has a gap on their resume, something that is missing, the thing that they're going to be like, that's the reason we didn't hire you. By the way, when somebody says, we didn't hire you because we went with this candidate who has this thing instead, that is just their excuse. There were a couple of you level pegging, and when you ask for feedback as to why you weren't hired, they go, that was the gap there. We hired this person because you had that gap. I can bet you that person had a gap against you. The question is, why did they sit higher in the ranking? And you're never going to get a clear answer on that. You are never going to get a clear answer on that. So it's really worth trying to understand how to plug those gaps and answer everything really well. One of the things we love to do is to say, I don't know how to do this. It's like the one thing I don't have. Here's why I'm going to be good at it. And this is exactly why I want to join your company. Turn that gap into an opportunity. Then finally, follow up. Every interview, every networking conversation, you need to send a personalized thank you note, follow-up message, reiterate your enthusiasm, follow up strategically. This is a game changer, and so many of us don't do it. So those are your 8 steps. This formula works. It's structured. It just works. When we have people follow this, they always land a job. The people that don't land a job aren't following this formula. So without further ado, let's move on to networking. Again, very important game changer. Ready to take notes. I'm going to hand over to Megan for this one.
Yeah. So this is one of my favorite topics. Tony had mentioned that she also dreaded networking, and I will say I fall into that same camp. I think one of the biggest misnomers as we enter networking, particularly when we are getting ready to look for that next job, is that it feels very one-sided. And one of the things that Tony said before is you are not asking for a job in networking. If you are doing that, you're doing networking wrong. Mm-hmm. Networking is truly about building and nurturing relationships in a way that helps serve you. And I think once you're able to rewrite that and just say, oh, I'm actually just connecting as a human, it becomes a lot less intimidating. Yes, if you're an introvert, it's still going to suck energy, right? But it feels much more natural. The other thing I will say is, even though it may feel uncomfortable to reach out and say, hey, it's been a long time, would love to catch up, and you know your motivation of I'm going to be forming this connection, hopefully I'll be able to get another connection and a job as a result of this, other people love to help, right? So when we think about what it means to be human, it is to connect. And we do, especially women in tech, love to uplift other women in tech. And so I think the first thing is starting to get rid of that concept of this is a one-way street. This is about developing and nurturing a strong relationship. That could be helping somebody else solve a problem. I had a client who they were networking with somebody, and the other person had shared that their daughter had cancer, and they were going to get like a unicorn stuffy for the chemotherapy. And this person said, I know somebody who makes stickers, and I would love to send a bunch of unicorn stickers to you. That person ended up helping them essentially got them a job a month later. And the conversation was never about getting a job, right? The simple gift was unicorn stickers. Now, even better if we can help somebody solve a problem, right? If you're catching up with a former colleague or somebody, a second degree connection, and they might be saying, hey, we're like really struggling with getting teams on board with this change. And you've done that before. This is your opportunity to give first and offer help others solve a problem or share useful resources for them. Even just commenting thoughtfully on somebody's LinkedIn post, I think really can help create that resonance with your network. And instead of asking, so we've said don't ask for jobs, right? We're offering help. This is one of the key things that I think has really helped people. Instead of asking, do you know of any jobs? Asking, is there anyone in your network that would benefit from knowing me? And asking if there could be an introduction. The other flip to that question is there anyone in your network that you know that I would benefit from connecting with? And then asking for them to do that mutual connection. When you get a warm connection with that like second degree connection, that your response rate to that connection request is going to be much higher. It's not, if you have a second degree connection and you reach out to someone on LinkedIn, it's more of like a 20% response rate. So that's the other thing I like. Part of the networking is getting out there and I call this rejection therapy. Know that not everybody's going to want to connect with you, and that is okay. But is that a reflection of you as a human being? That is a reflection of the world as it stands. And always, always, always finish your networking with the ask of, is there anything that I can do for you or anyone that I can introduce you to? We are amplifying each other's impacts, and we have unique connections that the other person may not know. And so with that, the other thing I will touch on is LinkedIn. LinkedIn is one of the, even though we've said a couple of things about things that don't work well on LinkedIn, networking is one of the best ways to leverage LinkedIn. In addition to posting your own thought leadership articles, which is super critical, it is creating resonance and engagement among your network. As Tony mentioned before, establishing yourself as a thought leader is really critical. And part of this is your network starting to see that and associate Tony with AI or whatever topic it is that you're particularly passionate about. It helps you stay top of mind without being super intrusive. So making it a habit to check in with your network, not just when you see something, but also to offer that support and stay updated on their projects and needs is super critical. Sharing, that the other thing would be don't just post, right? So I love people who are posting content. I love engaging with them, but engaging with others in your network is also really, really valuable. One, it helps them. So everything is an engine, right? That's out there. And so the more posts are engaged with, liked with, commented on, shared, you are actually doing the other person a favor by increasing their visibility, as well as strengthening your own personal connection with those individuals. And so now on to the scary part. Oh, that sounds good. I like LinkedIn. It's a little bit more anonymous, right? I'm not on a Zoom call with somebody. Now we're on to networking calls. So here we've got, your goal is to aim for 1 to 5 networking calls per week. As I mentioned, it is a little bit of a numbers game. Cold outreaches, 10% of the time will result in a call. With those warm connections, it's about 50% will lead to a conversation. And so your goal here really is to focus on building warm relationships through those referrals and introductions. It typically, when we say that this is a numbers game, it typically takes 3 introductions on average for a job to even be on the cards, right? And so it's all about getting in front of the right people at the right time and circling back and keeping in touch, understanding how people are doing. And so those are the main things there on networking. And the networking calls, again, it's about building human connection. It is, if you've seen somebody post something on LinkedIn, hey, I recently saw that you posted something on that, really enjoyed your perspective, would love to hop on a call, get to know you a little bit better, is a wonderful, natural way to have a joint interest to start that call. And then offering the help and finishing with an offer for them. And I started this at the top. Networking feels icky. It has felt icky for me. It feels selfish and awkward, right? These are the rules of engagement, similar to those 8 key steps that Tony laid out before. These rules of engagement help to address that level of ickiness. And another thing to keep in mind, particularly if networking is something that hasn't been a primary focus for you, is that anything new feels uncomfortable. So here it's really important to start with like your achievable goals here. If we're saying, hey, try to do 5 networking calls, it might be, I'm going to get one networking call on the books and build up your confidence and experience by going through that. It will, anytime you do something new, if you're new to the job market right now, it is going to feel uncomfortable because it is new. First time you start a Pilates class, it is going to be, well, Pilates is always hard, so I should maybe use a different one, but I think you get the point. When you start something new, it's a new muscle. And so giving yourself grace and creating those manageable goals, I think will definitely pay off on your job search in the long term.
I just want
anything to add there, Tony?
I do have two things to add. The first one is Pilates is always difficult.
Yeah.
But the second one is, although we've got on this slide, this is numbers game. That comes with a caveat, which is quality over quantity every time, which I think you've addressed, Megan, but I just wanted to reiterate. There is no point in sending out 100 messages for a connection request if you aren't doing it thoughtfully. Yes, you want to have a certain number of calls. And if you're doing this as a full-time job, if you're out of work, then aim for more, absolutely. But at the end of the day, quality is more important. It's going to open more doors for you. Spending more time tailoring your conversations, having a quality conversations is always going to serve you more than random conversations or just spray and pray. So quality numbers game. The numbers work out. If you can get to 5 calls a week, which is a full-time job in our experience in terms of the networking outreach, if you can get to that, you will land some opportunities for interviews fairly quickly. As we said, it's typically 3 introductions and you start getting people going, oh, there's a job here that you might be interested in. So the more you can do in 1 week, the faster you're going to go, but it just does take time because you've got to wait for those introductions to happen and they're non-zero time. But you shouldn't just get introductions for the sake of introductions. You need to be having quality conversations. They are the ones that are going to lead you to something, because quality over quantity every time. And Pilates is hard.
Pilates is hard.
Megan, let's go on to the next section. This is you. This is all about data. This is all you. So
this is all about data. I love data. Yeah. So the first thing is understanding, are you creating the opportunity? So we've talked a little bit about the application packet, some networking, and recruiter outreach, which we brushed over, and then networking. But really, if you have been on the job market and you are not getting responses, now is the time to really look at that data. And the first one is, are you actually leveraging your network? Are you getting those virtual coffee chats on the calendar? And how many introductions? This is really crucial if you want to know, is my networking working? Is whether or not people are offering to introduce you to somebody else. If they are not, if you are not getting those introductions, it's time to reevaluate how you're holding your networking conversations so that you are getting that amplification effect. The other thing is, you do have to apply for jobs. As Tony said, most jobs, even with a referral, are requiring an application. And applying to those helps you understand, without the referral first, whether or not your packet is actually going to get through the system. And so for every 10 jobs, think, am I getting at least 2 interviews? If you're not, there's something to tweak in your application packet. And then the other piece is recruiter outreach. So this is really critical when we're talking about our online presence with LinkedIn. Are you getting the right level of reach out? Are you getting reach out around jobs and the level of pay that you want and you're looking for? If you're getting reach out for jobs that you did 5 years ago, chances are there are some tweaks that need to be done to your online presence to improve the level and caliber of that reach out. As Tony said earlier, we do not need to be highlighting all of the stuff we've done in your past. It actually brings the algorithm down. So there's a little bit of optimization there when we think about those 3 opportunities. So get a spreadsheet. Even if you hate spreadsheets, get a spreadsheet and pull all of your data into here. How many opportunities are you getting? Have you been able to find at least 2 people to network related to the role that you're interested in? And is your application packet getting through that screening? And when we talk about application packet, we are also talking about your cover letter, your resume, and anything industry specific. So for example, you might have a portfolio or a GitLab, right? That might be relevant for this packet. When we're applying, the goal is to pass the screening at least 50% of the time. One of the big things that Tony and I are proponents of, you do not need every single requirement on that job description. In fact, if you do have every single requirement on that job description, you should be going for the next level above. And so it is, Tony talked about gaps before in the interview technique and how we phrase that. it is really important that you are not saying no to jobs just because you don't have 100% of that. The ATS systems are unsophisticated. And so really the goal here is let's get through 50% of those at a time. And then we want to be passing that interview process 50% of the time. So if I have a spreadsheet, I've got what are the jobs that I'm looking at? What are my connections? Do I have a referral? Have I talked to the recruiter? And then going through, did my application get through? Did I get an HR screen? Did I get the interviews? So you can start to diagnose along that line where you are falling down and where you can effectively focus your time. Again, if you're passing ATS, the issue isn't your resume. It is some other component of this process that needs to be evaluated. You only need 5 final stage interviews to land an offer. This is super critical. We have the word only in here because in this actually blows a lot of people's mind. You mean I may go through 5 final stage interviews to get an opportunity and offer that truly lights you up? That is what we see on average. And so, yes, go ahead.
What I was going to say here was, I would say the final 5 interviews, we've had one lady, and it's the lady we talked about from earlier, who ended up moving industries and upwards. She's the only lady I've worked with at all in 6 years nearly of coaching over 1,000 women who has needed more than 5. So this isn't an average. This is a maximum. That particular lady, she did actually have offers that were like, but she just wasn't excited about them. So she's the only lady I've worked with who took more than 5 final stage interviews to take an offer she was truly excited by. Most of my clients get an offer they're excited by after 3. That would say that's the average. 5 is the maximum. When you crack this data, when you understand this process, this is what we're talking about. If you can get to a final stage interview, you are on your way to something amazing.
Yes. Thank you for that, Tony. I think that is really correct. I have another client too that is turning down offers, right? Because there are situations where you're going to we talk about if you think about applying to colleges, your fallback jobs, right? Of like, that's good, but it's not my dream job. So when we're talking about this, part of that is you might get to the final stage for a job that you know that you won't take, right? Or you've got a really exciting opportunity over here that you want to take you want to go towards what your dream is. So that's also something to keep in mind here with the numbers here. We can go ahead and move on.
Oh, resilience. This is an interesting topic. Okay, I'm just gonna start this and I'm gonna hand back over to Megan, because I know she is passionate about making sure that we all have resilience in the job hunt. Because here's what we've seen. Because of those 8 steps, and this is data driven, this is actually just a recipe. The thing that holds you back, the thing that means that you don't follow the recipe, is your mindset. You have to, I would say this is the most important part of everything we're talking about today, which you were like, what about our resumes? What about our networking? You have to have the resilience to have the mindset to keep on the straight and narrow. And so I just wanted to touch on resilience very briefly. I know there's more to job hunting than resilience, but we need you to be aware of when you are struggling. We need to know when your perseverance is taking a hit. We need you to keep the optimism so you keep focused on the right data rather than going, that's hard. I'm going to do this thing over here, which I'm already good at, but it feels easy and therefore I'm going to do it, right? So part of what we want you to build is your own resiliency toolkit. So Megan, do you want to touch on how we do this with people job hunting?
Yeah. So one of the key things, I think resilience can sometimes be a little misunderstood. So when we're talking about here, we are talking about your ability to recover quickly from those difficulties, those setbacks, and being able to adapt as you move forward. So again, we've got this recipe. I had mentioned rejection therapy in a sense, right? Part of this is starting to own what is the value that you bring. Again, going back to the steps, understanding your own personal brand. What is your value proposition? And that is kind of front and center. And that's the piece that we're kind of carrying around in this job market when we're getting some of those rejections. And so when we work through this, first, it's understanding our emotional awareness. What are your triggers? right? Getting no, not getting somebody to respond to you, etc. What is it triggering? What is the action? What is it triggering in you? What is the story that you are telling about the missing data? And how can we look at that a little bit different? That allows us to persevere and flip it. What's the worst that could happen? And what's the best that could happen? And really kind of focusing on actually the best thing is to really kind of, the worst thing that could happen is actually not that bad. And the other piece is stress management. This is for people who are, this is your full-time job. And for those who are currently employed, who are looking for another one, we are talking about high stress, right? And what I will tell you is the way that you show up in interviews when you are stressed is the way that you're going to show up on the job when you are stressed. Learning how to regulate your own stress, be that through meditation, deep breathing, exercise, is really important so that you are showing up well regulated. Further, when we're stressed, we don't actually effectively problem solve. This shows up all the time for engineering case studies, even our behavioral questions. If you're stressed, you are not adapting to the questions. And so building on that resilience toolkit, your emotional awareness, understanding your triggers, and stress management helps you to problem solve more effectively on the job and while you are actually searching for that job and going through the interview process. And then also identifying your support network. So I have a wonderful husband, and I know that when I am in a high stress situation, I need to have at least 5 other people in my corner. That obviously I don't call in when I just need them, but because it's a network of people who support you and view you differently. One of the benefits to networking, especially if you're talking with former colleagues, is they can give you a totally different perspective. Let's say you're looking at this job, you're like, wow, that's a real big stretch for me. And I got an interview and I'm really intimidated. This is a resiliency trigger, right? And being able to utilize that support network to say, tell me about a time when I solved something that you haven't seen anybody else solve that way, right? These are all great ways to build up that toolkit for yourself. And the 3 key barriers really are that fear of failure. What if it doesn't work out? What if I don't get that job? Negative thinking patterns of, I didn't get that job because I'm not good enough. We've highlighted the gaps in our resume. This is where we see women go for lower positions than they actually are qualified for. Because
sorry, just to butt in here, something really important for all of you to hear. Or we get a rejection, and then next time we ask for less money because we're afraid that the reason we actually got rejected is because we asked for so much. Sorry, Megan, for interrupting.
Absolutely. 100%. It is the false stories that we are creating about the data and the absence of kind of the holistic knowledge in those situations. And then external pressures. So this is really, really critical. I know that being laid off and not being currently employed has financial pressures on us. And that is a crucial external pressure. There's pressure to support children, ensure that they're able to go to college, medical bills, elder care. All of these things are external pressures that make us feel like we should just take the okay thing as opposed to the thing that we know that we want and that we deserve. And I see this all of the time. If you feel desperate for the job, you are going to show up at the interview desperate. And just like a dog smells fear, hiring and interview teams smell desperation. And they do not want somebody who is desperate for a position. They want somebody who understands their value and how it's going to give back. And so really understanding what are those external pressures and understanding which valves do you have. There's always an alternative option, not an option we might like, right? But how do we figure out what those pressures are and find out how to solve them so that we can continue to move forward and build on our resilience? Went a little long on that, but I'm very passionate.
Well, this is a game changer. Your resilience is the thing that's going to help you land something, not just quickly and well, but also something that is going to set you up for success for the next however many years you're there. And we know that what you land next will impact what comes after that. It is worth getting this right. Okay, I've got a few slides to wrap up with. We've been through a lot today, but first things first, remember this. Don't fix what isn't broken. Use the data approach. Get your spreadsheet. If you're struggling with your spreadsheet, there's an opportunity to book a call with me at the end of this, right? If you're struggling with your spreadsheet, come and have a conversation with me. Let's figure out a way that works for you, but follow the data. Don't work on filling a step in the process if it isn't broken. Fix the broken step. Make sure you are getting feedback. What isn't working and why not? And feedback comes in many ways. It comes from asking why you didn't get hired. That comes with its own caveats. It comes from asking people to review your resume. It comes from working with us as coaches, potentially. Figure out what isn't working and what is working. Get feedback, even if the feedback is your data. That is a form of feedback. Look at your mindset. Why is your mindset the way it is? Is it holding you up? Are you addressing what really matters? Are you burying your head in your sand? Are you distracting yourself because you're telling yourself you don't like networking? That's my thing. I don't like networking. I'm not going to network today. I'm going to do all this other stuff over here, which isn't going to land me a job. Look at your mindset. Figure out what in your mindset is holding you up. I can guarantee your mindset is doing something unhelpful because it's human. But if you can figure it out, you can do something about it. And that's also why we're here. Look at your current strategy. If it's not working, why not? Go through those 8 steps I shared and ask yourself, what are those steps am I not doing? Or am I getting stuck on those steps? Or what are those steps have I not completed? If you don't know, again, come and have a conversation with me. Which brings me to the final thing. You don't have to do this alone. You really, really don't. Some people have great success by themselves. Don't get me wrong. But if you're struggling, I want you to know that there is help out there and you will probably land a job faster and for more money by getting the right help. I have just in the last 2 weeks, doubled one lady's salary. Last year, I tripled one person's salary, right? And most people get an easy 20% pay rise. Easy. Most of us are underpaid as women, for starters. So sometimes getting help is so self-fulfilling because you land the job faster. So rather than waiting 6 months, you land a job faster, or even 12 months. So you get that money in your pocket sooner and you get more money. So you don't have to do this by yourself. If you're struggling, get help. Whether it's us or someone else, don't do it by yourself. Learning how to do this well, learning how to interview well is not something you're taught in school. Learning how to interview as a leader is not something you pick up by osmosis. Somebody has to teach you. There's no course out there. There's no MBA that says this is how interviews for leaders go, right? We've figured it out because of all our years of coaching and also our own success. We want to share it with you, but find a resource that teaches you how to do this. Okay, final thing I want to say is why you need to act now. Some people I've spoken to have held off because surely it's going to get better. Here's the thing, we don't know when it's going to get better. I do believe at some point things are going to shift because everything comes in cycles, but we've been waiting 2 years, which is the longest downturn in the tech sector I think I'm aware of. 2025 might not be any better. We genuinely do not know. And what we are seeing, as I mentioned earlier on, is actually when you figure out how to do this, the downturn is not the problem. The downturn is just making everybody play at a higher level. That's all. When you figure out how to operate in this market, you are set for the rest of your career. The things that you have to figure out to work in this market are the exact same things I've been teaching people to land senior executive positions for 5 years before the economic downturn. You're just having to figure this out sooner. So don't wait. If you wanted a new job, if you've got a toxic environment, you're underpaid, you want more experience, you want to move industries, whatever your reason is that you're considering, stop holding off. You've got to figure this out at some point. You might as well start now. And I want you to finish with this, just to give you some optimism. These are a few of our success stories. We have many, many success stories. And I've changed some of these names, not all of them, but some of these names have been changed for privacy because we really respect the privacy of our clients. Liz came to work with us just earlier this year and she landed a new job within 3 weeks. And this is a very unusual case. I want to highlight that. But I just want you to know what you can do by having a network in place. She's already built her network. This is why having a network is so important for the rest of your career. She came to work with us to level up in her current role and decided actually after her first conversation she wanted a new role, went out and landed it within 3 weeks. And is now a CTO and she is completely kick-ass. Taylor is the lady I spoke to you about earlier who landed a role 2 levels up in 4 months in a completely different industry. Sadie went from having loads of interviews. This is a lady who could get to interview, but she just couldn't land the interview. So we looked at her pipeline. We figured out interviews the problem. She was working on her resume. But we worked on her interview technique, and immediately she landed a job that was an 80K pay rise with a 70K bonus. She'd never had a bonus before, even though that company had a hiring freeze. This is why this story is here. The pay rise is lovely. That's fairly typical actually around here, I would say. But the hiring freeze, landing a job when the company has a hiring freeze, it's all about saying, I'm the next best thing you need. I'm the thing that's going to turn this company around. And that's what she did. And then Katie, this is a lady you worked with just a couple of months ago as well. She got herself a head of sales position after being laid off and having a very negative spring. She came to work with us in the summer, and she's now managing a growing team in a hyper-growth startup just 9 weeks after being let go. And those 8 of those weeks, she just spent in a very negative space, really negative space. But I think we started working together 6 weeks after she'd been let go. She'd been on garden leave for 3 months before that. So she'd had 6 months of just being in this really bad space. And we came, and honestly, the thing we did was mindset work. And then she started talking to she figured that she loves hypergrowth. She loves startups. She needed that head of sales role, which she'd done, but not had the title for. Figured out what she wanted, and she started leveraging her network. And she started a role, I think in June or July. And because she's just come out of her first 90 days. So I want you to know, if they can do it, so can you. So there you have it. I hope that was useful to you. I would actually love to hear from you over on LinkedIn or in our Leading Women in Tech Slack community, which, by the way, hop up to the show notes, get the link to join us there. Let me know if you've tried anything we talked about, what is and isn't working for you. The more we can learn from each other, the better, in my opinion. And yes, I have got lots of data from working with lots of clients on the job hunt, but that doesn't mean there isn't more for me to learn. And the more we can do this to help each other, the better. So let me know, does this resonate with you? What's your experience? Are you just getting started and feeling a bit daunted? Just share. There's nothing wrong with sharing. Sometimes sharing can do an awful lot for our mental health. Thank you for listening, and let me know what you think. Until next time, you got this. You can do this. Remember, the job market isn't as hard as you think it is. Bye for now.